Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're looking at a truly massive leap forward in how we visualize the physical world, specifically remote land. Now, for years, drone mapping has been an absolutely incredible tool for surveying and measuring. But, what if you don't just want to measure a piece of land? What if you want to actually experience it? Well, today, we are breaking down a technology that is literally changing the game for remote property visualization, and it's called Gaussian Splatting. We're going to look at exactly what it is, how it stacks up against the traditional tools we're already used to, and exactly where it fits perfectly into real-world projects. Welcome to The Explainer.
To really grasp why this new tech is so exciting, we first have to understand the core problem it solves. Imagine for a second, you're looking to invest in this lush ocean view lot down in Costa Rica. But there's a catch. You live thousands of miles away. Historically, a drone flight would give you basically two things: a flat, top-down aerial photo, or a cloud of mathematically measured points. And don't get me wrong, those are incredibly useful if you're a surveyor. But for a buyer, a flat drone photo and a dry point cloud they don't convey the reality. They don't give you the feeling or the true layout of a dense jungle property. Point clouds are great for math, but to a buyer, it kind of just looks like a math textbook exploded, right? You can't actually walk through the trees or feel the slope of the land. This remote viewing problem has always been a massive barrier. Well, until now. Enter Gaussian Splatting, or as it's often shortened, 3D GS. And guys, this is where things get really interesting. 3D Gaussian Splatting is a revolutionary way of reconstructing a real physical place in 3D, and it does it using just ordinary photos or drone video. But instead of turning out some clunky, heavy architectural model, it creates a perfectly smooth, photorealistic 3D scene. And here is the absolute best part. You don't need some massive gaming rig or insanely expensive software to view it. Because the format is just so incredibly light and efficient, you can fly around and explore this immersive environment in real time, literally right in a standard web browser on your normal everyday laptop or even your phone. It's honestly like teleporting straight to the site.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core difference in the underlying mechanics. If you're familiar with traditional photogrammetry, you know it works by trying to build a hard surface, right? A rigid geometric mesh made out of polygons. And hey, that's great for buildings, but it's pretty terrible for messy, complex things like trees. Gaussian splatting takes a totally different approach. It actually drops the hard mesh entirely. Instead, it represents the scene using millions of tiny, soft-colored blobs, and these are the actual splats. Think of them as these little fluid clouds of color, and each one has its own position and its own level of transparency. When you render millions of these fluid splats together, they overlap to create a stunningly cohesive, realistic image.
And it's exactly those tiny, transparent, colored blobs that make splats feel like pure magic when you're looking at complex environments. Because the splats are soft and they overlap, they can capture things that traditional 3D meshes simply choke on. Reflections on water or glass, splats handle them beautifully. What about dense, complicated foliage, like a Costa Rican jungle canopy? Splats map the leaves perfectly without turning them into these weird, chunky green blocks. They capture the really fine ground textures and this profound sense of depth that makes the whole scene feel lifelike rather than computer-generated. It is just a massive upgrade in visual fidelity.
What's equally fascinating here is the timeline of this technology. Centimeter-accurate drone mapping has been standard practice since around 2017. But get this, the Gaussian splatting technique was only published as an academic paper in 2023. Normally, it takes years, if not decades, for a research curiosity to become a practical, everyday tool. But the results of 3D GS were just so undeniably powerful that the industry practically sprinted to adopt it. It's wild how fast this moved. Fast forward to May 2026, and major mainstream photogrammetry software companies like SimActive with their Correlator3D platform have already added Gaussian splatting. The mapping and surveying industry now treats this not as some neat little gimmick, but as a standard, totally expected output.
So the crucial point is this. It all comes down to one absolutely vital distinction. LiDAR and photogrammetry are for measuring. Gaussian splatting is for seeing. If you take just one single thing away from this explainer today, let it be this. We are not replacing our traditional measuring tools. Actually, scratch that, we're doing something better. We're adding a dedicated, highly specialized visualization tool to our kit. I mean, you wouldn't use a tape measure to paint a portrait, right? And you definitely wouldn't use a splat to measure a property line. They serve completely different yet entirely complementary purposes.
Let's break down exactly when to use which tool, especially when you're dealing with a really complex landscape. So, LiDAR gives you a measurable 3D point cloud that pierces right through dense forest canopies. That is strictly for survey-grade terrain. Photogrammetry, that gives you measurable elevation data and models, which is absolutely perfect for calculating volumes on wide open terrain. But Gaussian splatting, it gives you absolutely zero measurable data. Zero. Instead, it provides a photorealistic, fully explorable 3D visualization. It's your ultimate tool for marketing, immersive walkthroughs, and stakeholder review. Basically, you use the first two to satisfy the engineers, and you use splatting to completely amaze the clients.
And when we apply this concept to a market like Costa Rica, the value just explodes. The real-world applications here are incredibly vivid. Just think about real estate being sold completely sight unseen. A buyer sitting in an apartment in Toronto or Munich can literally virtually walk through the tree cover of a property, actually understand the slope of the terrain, and see their exact future ocean view, all before ever booking a flight. Or consider tourism. Hotel guests can explore an eco-lodge's beach access in stunning 3D before making a reservation. For construction projects, owners and architects can remotely review site progress together from the exact same digital vantage point. And for conservation, we can preserve these explorable, highly detailed snapshots of heritage sites and nature reserves exactly as they existed on a specific day.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because mechanically speaking, creating this immersive experience doesn't actually require reinventing the wheel. First, it just starts with a drone flying a thorough pattern to capture overlapping, oblique angles. Then, traditional structure from motion software processes those photos to map exactly where the camera was up in the sky for each shot. But the real magic happens when that data is fed into software like PostShot, Luma, or Gsplat. This software trains the scene into millions of splats, and the result is just a single file that you can effortlessly open and share in any normal web browser. And the best part? That very first drone flight can actually feed both your measurable maps and this beautifully walkable scene. It's a total 2-for-1.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to be completely honest about the limits of this tech. Splats are visualizations, period. They are not legal dimensions, they aren't georeferenced survey data, and they are definitely not certified to centimeter accuracy. If you're doing business in Costa Rica, for example, a splat cannot produce and absolutely cannot replace our registered plano catastrado, which is the official legal survey. That must always be prepared and stamped by a licensed topographo using actual real-world measurements from RTK GPS, LiDAR, or photogrammetry. So the easiest way to think about it is this. The splat is the beautiful, glossy presentation layer sitting right on top of the hard, rigorous survey work.
Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative question for you to consider. Are you ready to see your project as it truly is, rather than just how it measures? Gaussian splatting bridges that huge gap between the raw data of a survey and the actual human experience of a physical location. Honestly, it's the most exciting advancement in drone visualization we've seen in years, and it's completely transforming how we share, understand, and explore remote spaces. So, whether you're selling a vision to a buyer across the globe, or you're just trying to align a remote construction team, this tool changes everything. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.